All right, let's just jump right in. We're going to tackle a question that I think has driven language learners crazy forever. Why is it that you can understand a language, like, perfectly, but the second you try to speak it, just nothing?
You know that feeling, right? It's just so frustrating. You're in a conversation, you're following every single word, you're nodding along, and then it's your turn to reply, and your brain just hits a wall. It feels like the words are in there somewhere, but you just can't get them out. Well, you are not alone in this, not at all.
And this is a real thing. It's a super common experience. I mean, check out this story from a Reddit user. It just captures the whole puzzle perfectly. His friend hears Polish all the time from his mom, understands it completely, but he just can't produce it. How does that even happen? So that's the mystery we're going to unravel today. What is this huge gap between our listening skills and our speaking skills? Let's get into the actual science behind it. Okay, first things first, let's get one thing straight. If this happens to you, it has absolutely nothing to do with how smart you are or how big your vocabulary is. It's actually a super fascinating quirk of neuroscience. It's kind of like a feature of how our brains are built, not some kind of bug. So where do we start? Well, the first big clue comes down to this really fundamental idea in psychology that explains so much about how our memory works. Okay, think about it like this. If I showed you a map of the United States, could you recognize it? Yeah, of course, easy. But could you draw that same map from scratch with all the states in the right spots? That's a completely different ballgame, right? So much harder. It's the exact same reason why pretty much all of us would rather take a multiple choice test than write an essay. With multiple choice, the answer is literally right there on the page. You just have to recognize it. But with an essay, you have to recall all that information from deep inside your brain and then build something new with it. And this is what really gets to the heart of our language problem. Hearing and understanding a language, that's a passive skill. It's like recognizing a face in a photo. But speaking, that's an active skill. That's like trying to draw that face from pure memory. So here's the bottom line. When you're listening to someone speak, all the cues are there for you. The words, the grammar, the sentence structure, your brain just has to recognize it all. But when you speak, you have to generate all of that from scratch. You're basically going from being an audience member to being the actor up on stage. But that kind of begs a bigger question, right? Why are these skills so separate in the first place? I mean, why doesn't understanding just naturally lead to speaking? Well, the answer is literally wired into the physical structure of our brains. Get this. We basically have two different language centers in our brain. There's Wernicke's area. You can think of it as the librarian. Its whole job is language comprehension, processing what you hear and what you read. Then you've got Broca's area, which is like the spokesperson. It's in charge of language production, actually forming the words and sentences. So in a normal, smooth conversation, these two areas are talking to each other constantly. The librarian figures out the meaning, shoots that info over to the spokesperson, and then the spokesperson crafts a reply. But, and this is so important, they are two separate departments. And how do we know for sure that they're separate? Well, tragically, we know because of a condition called expressive aphasia, which is also known as Broca's aphasia. This is what happens when the spokesperson area of the brain gets damaged, but the librarian is still working perfectly. This right here is a real transcript from a patient with this exact condition. You can tell their understanding is totally fine. They know exactly what they want to say about a dental appointment. But that ability to produce smooth grammatical sentences, it's gone. The speech is halting. It's difficult. This is probably the most dramatic proof you can get that understanding and speaking are two completely different jobs in the brain. Okay, so we figured it out. The culprits are this whole recall versus recognition thing and the fact that we have two separate language centers in our brain. So now for the big question. How do we fix it? How do we build a bridge between the two? How do we get the librarian and the spokesperson to work together better? First, let's just put a name to this whole thing. The phenomenon is officially called receptive bilingualism. Some people call it passive fluency, and it's incredibly common, especially for people who maybe grew up hearing a language at home from their parents or grandparents, but then spoke another language everywhere else. Their comprehension muscle is super strong, but their production muscle, it's never really been exercised. Well, the answer is actually pretty simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy. You have to actively train Broca's area, your spokesperson. You have to shift from just being a passive listener to being an active producer of the language. You've got to think of it like going to the gym, but for your brain.
Here is a great, simple routine you can try. It's called the PCA method. First, P is for pickup. Just find one phrase you understand, but you never ever say. Then, C is for consult. Look it up, see how it's used in different sentences. And then, the most important part, A is for activate. You have to make your own sentences about your own life using that phrase, and this is critical, say them out loud. That's what forces the recall process.
Another really powerful technique is called shadowing. Basically, you listen to a native speaker and you just repeat what they say in real time, like you're their echo. You're not even thinking about the meaning. You're just trying to mimic the sounds, the rhythm, the intonation. This builds that physical muscle memory for your mouth and tongue, and it trains your brain's spokesperson. And finally, we just have to talk about the psychological side of it. Linguists have a term for this. They call it the affective filter. And really, it's just that fear, that anxiety about making a mistake or sounding silly that literally blocks our brain's ability to speak. So any kind of low-stakes practice, talking to yourself, shadowing, using an app, it all helps lower that filter and build the confidence you need to actually try. Which really brings us to a final thought to leave you with. What we've seen today is that understanding and speaking are just fundamentally different skills, and they're handled by different parts of the brain. So is just recognizing a word really the same as truly knowing it? It seems like the answer is a pretty clear no. True mastery isn't just about what you can understand, it's about what you can create. And that's a really powerful idea to think about.